Okay, a few people are still coming in and clamoring to get into the hottest thing in LA tonight. So, first of all, turn off your cell phones. I know you want to take a picture of Bonnie and Diane, so you can do that, and then you turn off your cell phones. Thank you so very much for coming to tonight's program. To grab a few lessons following supper at 6. I'm Andrea Grossman, the founder of Writer's Block, now in our 27th season. I want to thank the Abel for making this glorious theater available tonight. And I have been asked, I'm a member of the Abel, and it's a membership organization, and they have asked me to sort of shill for it. So join, it's a reasonable thing. They're great programs, like they're great programs. And you get to go and sit in places like this. Like the other night, Adam Schiff was here, apparently. Even though I'm a member, I didn't realize that, but whatever. I should open my emails more. Anyway, so join, and that part's done. Thank you to the Abel. I love this room and the women who run it. And huge thanks to Bonnie Garmus, whose novel has taken us by storm. And thanks to Diane Arieff for stepping into this literary laboratory with us this evening. I promise there are no more metaphors like that. Before I get to tonight, I want to thank a dear friend, Todd Dowdy, for offering this program to Writer's Block. He is one of the fiercest and kindest advocates for Writer's Block in publishing, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. I also want to acknowledge the people from Apple TV who are here tonight, who have developed lessons in chemistry into a series. And you're going to get to see a clip, and it's so exciting. And to them I say, oh my God, Brian, this is loud. To them I say thank you, and please hurry up with this series. You can't expect me to wait till fall. Now for tonight. Why do we love lessons in chemistry so much? How is it that every generation loves it so much? Is it that our hero, Elizabeth Zott, is so shrewdly brilliant, so forcefully self-committed in spite of what she's endured? Is it because she has arguably the best dog in contemporary literature, who makes us rethink how we even look at our own pets? Is it because she bucks convention at every opportunity and makes people listen to her, whether they like it or not? Is it because at this time in our American moment, we have a maddeningly rational woman who can convince the world to embrace the beauty of science? Is it because she reminds us of John Irving at his very, very, very best? I could go on without even mentioning how perfectly funny it is in spite of its often dark undertones. If you haven't read it, you must. And if you have read it, you'll have 1,000 questions and answers of your own. And no doubt Diane Arieff does too. You no doubt saw her name in the Jewish Journal, where she was the arts editor for years. She's now an English professor at Santa Monica College, where she teaches creative writing. So here's what's going to happen tonight. Bonnie and Diane will talk about lessons in chemistry. And when they're through, you can ask questions. Bonnie will sign copies of her book, it's so good, which are available in the lobby, courtesy of Chevalier's bookstore. I can't think of a more perfect gift for Mother's Day, people, for graduation, for National Rescue Dog Day, and yes, it is a thing, and it's coming up in 2 weeks. So many occasions to get this book for. So I'm so delighted to present Bonnie Garmus with Diane Arieff.
How's this? Good? Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. First off, I just want to congratulate Bonnie on her spectacular success with this book. When I was trying to think about what to make of this success, one thing I came up with is that you should probably take me out to dinner every time you come to Los Angeles. That would... But you know, I've known Bonnie a long time, and she happens to be a really fantastic human being. So this is a case where fantastic things happen to wonderful people. So sometimes the universe gets it right, like they did this time. So Bonnie, I want to start out asking you about your protagonist, because the book takes place in the late 1950s and the early 1960s, what misogynists might think of as the golden age. And so talk to us a little bit about your choice of protagonist, Elizabeth Zott, who kind of is the reader's window into this world.
Well, Elizabeth Zott, as she was saying, is a rationalist. And I wanted to write a rationalist when I started writing this novel. It felt like the world was getting more and more irrational. News doesn't make any sense anymore. Nothing made any sense anymore to me. And I wanted to create a role model for myself. Because I was having lots of problems still at work. And I'd had a really bad day at work one day where vice president had stolen all of my ideas in front of 10 men who did nothing to support or help me. These were colleagues I'd worked with for 10 years. So I was in a really bad mood that day when I left that meeting. And instead of going back to my desk and working on the deadline that was pressing down on me that day, I wrote the first chapter of Lessons in Chemistry. I know, and now I have a funny story later about those 10 men. 10 unhappy men. But anyway, no, it really occurred to me at that time, the reason why I said it at that time period of the late 50s, early 60s, was because I was looking for reassurance that we as women had moved forward in the world. Yeah, and we have a little. We need to move forward a lot harder, a lot faster. And of course, in the United States, I live in London, and I can just tell you all the UK is outraged by the Roe versus Wade decision. And they say, if it can happen in the United States, it can happen anywhere in the world. And so you should know that the UK women have your back. So it is really interesting to me, and that's why I wanted this protagonist. What would she do? She was living in, as you say, the golden age of misogyny. What would she do today?
Yeah. Well, you talked about having a bad day at work and kind of letting anger fuel that first chapter, and it makes me want to ask you about the role of anger in the book. Stephen King tweeted about your book a few months after it came out, and he said it's witty, sometimes hilarious, angry, and often surreal. It's the catch-22. Oh, I'm sorry. Stephen King said it's witty, sometimes hilarious, angry, and often surreal. It's the catch-22 of early feminism. And there is a lot of female rage in the book, but along with that rage, there's a lot of humor and humanity, and it feels hopeful. So I guess I wanted to ask you, as you wrote and revised, how deliberate was that effort to keep a balance between the anger and the hope and humanity in a way that served both?
Well, I think if you're going to write about dark things, and the book is full of dark things, people aren't going to read much further. Hi, Mary. I saw an old friend. People aren't going to read much further if it just keeps going down the dark hole. And so it was really important to me. Probably, I don't know if you can notice this, in the book there's a theme of balance versus imbalance. So in the book is balance between dark and light. Rowing is the sport of balance, and chemistry is actually the science of balance. You can't have an unbalanced chemical equation. So that's what I wanted to run underneath the structure of the book.
Well, it works beautifully. And the humor translates, and I was thinking, you're funny in real life. and you're funny in the book, and you've been living in London, as you said. Were you worried that your humor wouldn't translate?
Yeah, I was really worried about that. It's really strange, though. I was in Dubai, and I thought, okay, well, gosh, it's selling pretty well in Arab countries. And I thought, I wonder what that translation says. But I got my answer because I was sitting with about 20 or 25 women. They were all in burqas, and we were talking about feminism around the world. And they were just hilarious because I said, we really need to work harder. We have these problems in the UK and the United States. And they just started laughing. They said, you think you have problems.
What's the cover like in Dubai?
It's very strange. It has this woman, I think a man designed cover. Well, you know what? Look it up on my website.
I don't want to stump you. Yes, that's what I'll do. I want to ask you also about points of view in this book. I know many people in the audience read it already, and some people haven't, but you tell it from multiple points of view, and it's a real pleasure. Did you always conceive it that way, and what did doing it that way allow you to do with the story?
Well, my original intent was to round Elizabeth Zott out by having 10 people view her and give us their opinions of her, because she represents the catalyst in the book. This is a book about chemistry. We are ruled by chemistry on this planet. We are ruled more by chemistry on this planet than any human-made law. And so I love the idea of creating a character who doesn't really change. She is the catalyst, and every single person she touches, she changes.
It's beautifully put, and it was something I was aware of as I was reading the way chemistry is text and subtext in your book. It's the central metaphor, and all throughout the book, this idea of bonding and reactions and collisions and change is organic. That's a bad pun. I mean, it happens naturally. It doesn't feel forced. And was that there from the beginning as part of the design of the book?
No. I didn't, I still don't write from an outline or anything. And when I was writing the book, every time I felt like something was going to happen, I felt like there was a character knocking on the door wanting to get in. And then you just have to let them in. And my theory is, if you want a character to come in, what you do is you put them in a very uncomfortable situation. And if you do that, then the character becomes real because they're flawed. Because their flaws come out. When people are in conflict, you see all their weak sides. They become really vulnerable.
And then you went and researched chemistry as you got more invested in that as your kind of governing principle?
Well, yeah, I want to say I researched chemistry. I did research it. I bought a book off of eBay because, yeah, I know, an old textbook, it was $3. And I thought, how hard can this be? Really bad idea. I'm a copywriter, and copywriters never ever write what they know. And so I thought, well, how hard could chemistry be? Well, the London Fire Department will tell you that I'm not a good chemist. But also they came twice, and the first time they came, they asked me what I was doing. The guy saw this chemistry thing there, and he said, you're not actually conducting experiments here in your flat. And I said, we're renters. And he goes, oh, okay. The second time, he was the same guy. He wasn't as impressed.
And is he going to be in the next book? I read recently that your book was adopted as part of the curriculum at an all-boys school.
Yeah.
And I thought, can you tell me? Yeah. I was really moved by that and really encouraged by that. And with my students, we always talk about what makes fiction powerful, what makes literature powerful. And you can inhabit the life of someone else and take this imaginative leap of empathy and understand other people. And I think girls of our generation, certainly we were mostly reading stories centered around boys because that's what was there. So that's a beautiful development, and it led me to wonder what the response to your book has been from male readers. Were they surprised by some of the experiences that were depicted in the book because it was unfamiliar to them?
I can just tell you, there are two boys' schools, both in England, who adopted the book. And I hear from the boys all the time. These are my favorite direct messages to get. My most favorite one, well, there have been a couple, but my most favorite one was from this kid. It said, "Dear Bonnie Garmus, thank you for writing lessons in chemistry. It was way better than Lord of the Flies." But I'll tell you, the dean said that they wanted to adopt the book because they don't want their boys growing up sexist. And I got another email, direct message from a kid at this school, and he's 13, and he said, after reading lessons in chemistry, I turned to my mother and I said, "Why do you let Dad talk to you that way?"
Wow.
So it's really interesting to raise that consciousness, but I have to respect those two deans for saying, this is what we're teaching our boys.
Yeah, I was really struck, and so was the audience. I mean, that reaction tells you we're not used to hearing that.
Yeah.
What about adult male readers that you've come across? You've been promoting the book for a year. Do you get interesting reactions about what was depicted? Do they think it's mainly historical?
No, male readership has grown just hugely over the last 5 months or so. I mean, it's a peculiar situation. I think I was talking to you, Todd, about this. I was talking to two sheiks in Dubai, and they were like, "We loved the book." And I went, "Really?" More like, "Oh, really?" But no, it's really interesting because the men sometimes see themselves as the Walter or the Calvin, who are very supportive of women and like having male allies in a book to look up to, and also, like disparaging the men who aren't leaders. There are lots of men who've said, "I was bullied at work."
Right.
I completely understand Walter's point of view, and I was rooting for Elizabeth.
Right. There are sympathetic men in the book, and it's part of what makes it so hopeful and humane. You're unflinching about a lot in that book, but it's tremendously hopeful, I think, ultimately. And I'm still fixated on the fact that you said I was talking to two sheiks in Dubai. As a way to start a sentence, Bonnie. That's a mic drop, right? I've known Bonnie a long time, and she was a strong fiction writer even back in grad school. And I know you've written in all kinds of contexts since then, and manuscripts, but what was completing this novel in all its iterations? What did it teach you as a novelist?
To not give up. Honestly, writing a novel is an endurance sport. And I think if you give up on writing, you can choose to just give up, but that's your choice. And if you decide not to give up, who knows what will happen. But I think one of the things that rowing has given me is this idea of endurance. In a race, you can't just decide to stop. I have considered it several times. But you can't. You have to keep going. It's just really endurance.
Yeah, I believe you. Do you think you're finished with this set of characters?
Oh, Diane. Is that the sequel question?
No, but I can't help but think that there's a book in Madeline.
Oh my God, everybody says that.
Really?
So I wrote half a book, and Mad was the protagonist, and she was a grown woman. And Elizabeth Zott was in that book, but she was only 3 sentences long. And all I knew about her was that she was a chemist, she was on TV, and she was depressed. And then, boom, she came back to me that bad day at work. She was like, you think you've had a bad day. I've had a bad decade. And that's how the story unfolded that day.
Well, George Eliot was great at writing kids, and you can just look at it as that you were just great with the kids in the book, so they were compelling. They popped out, always.
Well, it's really interesting that you say that because I feel like I could write Mad because I knew who she became as an adult.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Who?
I can't tell you that, Diane. Margaret Thatcher.
Are we doing Mad Libs now? All right, so you set it up. You're working on a new novel.
Yeah.
I won't annoy you by asking what's it about.
Okay, great.
If Lessons in Chemistry is about change and courage, and is there a subject or a question that preoccupies you with what you're working on now?
Yes.
What did we say in advance about yes/no answers, Bonnie?
No.
All right, I'll move on.
I'm sorry, I can't talk about my new novel because, about 3 months ago, I was doing one of these events, and someone said, oh, what's your new novel about? So I went, it's about blah, 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 and now it's not. And so I told this huge audience that that's what it was about. And then I was on a podcast, and I said, actually, it's not about that anymore. I got about 100 direct messages going, you're a liar. You said it was about this. So now I don't talk about it because I don't write from an outline. It just changed on me.
Will you nod if it's about Margaret Thatcher? Well, I know you as a very grounded person, even with all this success, but what about 630, the fictional dog in your book? I noticed he has an Instagram account and is an influencer now, so has success spoiled 630?
Yeah. Actually, my poor dog, 99, has to pose as 630, and she absolutely hates it. She's like, I'm so sick of hearing about 630. My agent had told me she said, oh, I think you should do a dog Instagram. And I went, I can't even do a person Instagram. So I have attempted it, but I'm pretty lousy at it, and it's just withering on the vine. But anyway, yeah, you want to know about 630? 630 is based on a real dog. 630 is the only character in the book based on something real. That was my dog Friday, and she was brilliant. She was the smartest person in our family, and if dogs took SATs, she could have gone to any school. She would have gotten in. She was just amazing. We got her from a shelter, and she'd been really badly abused. Really badly abused. The guy who abused her went to jail. He burned cigarettes out on her back, and he cut her, and he knocked out all of her teeth on the bottom. Yeah, okay, and she smelled really bad. She had 2 kinds of mange. So we're going through the shelter looking at all the dogs, and my kids go, oh, look at that cute one. And my husband and I went, okay, we need to get their vision checked, because this was possibly one of the ugliest dogs I'd ever seen, and she smelled really bad. And the vet said, it's the mange medicine. And then he said, don't worry, it's not the kind that humans get. Wow, okay, I didn't know there was a kind. Anyway, so the kids loved her, and we took her home, and she just turned out to be Einstein. And she would sit at our dinner table, and instead of just laying there, when we were talking, she'd watch our mouths. And so, we would be talking, she'd be like this, and now we're over here, and now we're over here, and now we're right back over here. And she would show us that she was picking up words from us by demonstrating, bringing us things. And one day, I used to take her to work with me too. And this was before, you could put a fake vest on your dog and say it was an emotional support dog or something. I used to take her to work with me, and I was going by an elevator one day, and the guy goes, so what is her disability, do you know? And the guy goes, it must be really serious. But anyway, I couldn't find my keys to go to work one morning, and I said out loud, oh my God, I can't find my keys. And all of a sudden Friday went, and she started going through my gym bag, and then she went through my briefcase. And then she opened up the hall closet, and she went through all the pockets of the jackets, found my keys and threw them on the floor and went, "Can we go now?"
Wow.
And then we moved to Switzerland and she learned German.
Wow.
I'm not even kidding about that. Dogs in Switzerland have to take this really hard test because you have to be a good Swiss dog citizen. You get a Swiss passport and you get your picture on it. Her picture's like this. And it allows you to travel anywhere with your person. It doesn't matter where it is, the opera, wherever, you go where your person goes. And the whole test is in German. And they take the dog away from you. And the Swiss guy came back and he said, "This dog is not American. This dog is Swiss."
Wow.
Anyway, she got 100%, and he said it was the first dog to get 100% on a German exam in 2 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So we would say to her, "V. Gates," and she like, "Oh God, don't start with me."
Was this dog your ghostwriter?
Yeah. Okay. So when I write, I read everything out loud, and whenever I looked up, she's like, "No, I didn't like that." More 6:30.
It's alarming how easily I can picture that. In the book, you have Elizabeth as a young woman, and then you have her daughter, and you have her neighbor, Mrs. Sloan, and it's sort of like 3 generations moving through these experiences. Talk a little bit about your intention with showing women at all these different stages.
Yeah, that was a really considered decision because I wanted to have a woman from an older generation who'd really had no chance at all to pursue anything that she wanted. Then I wanted to have a woman like Elizabeth who was still stuck in your misogynist area of the golden era, who was educated, self-educated, but was educated and was determined to do something different, and then have a child who's being raised without limits by a mother who doesn't believe in limits. And so I wanted to see the way those 3 would interact and how they would come to support each other and create a new family. And so the older woman was really important to me because I think you need to honor the wisdom of this other generation. And that's the woman who ends up helping Elizabeth, who did not want to be a mother and who wanted to self-abort by extra-erging, accept her role as a mother.
Right.
Yeah. So they had to learn from each other. And then she had to learn from Elizabeth as well, that she was worthy.
Oh, that's beautifully put. And she's a compelling character, Mrs. Sloan. She goes through a big arc in that book.
Yeah.
I guess related to that, how fitting is it that you have said that one of your daughters, now grown, said to you, "Mom, finish the damn novel"?
I know, God, kids, they're just like nags. We were living in we got transferred around. We were living in Switzerland, and then we were transferred. We were being transferred to Stockholm, and then right before we were transferred to Stockholm, now we're being transferred to London. And we arrived in London, and I didn't know anybody, and I was getting kind of tired of moving all the time. And my work, unfortunately, followed me wherever I went because of the internet. I mean, you used to be able to say, "Oh, I can't come to a meeting because I'll be out of town." They go, "No, there's the internet." It was before Zoom, though. But anyway, so I moved to London, and I was feeling pretty sorry for myself. And my husband was traveling constantly, so he wasn't around. And my daughter sent me a link to an online class, and the class was called Finish Your Novel, but she called it Finish Your Fucking Novel. So I signed up for the class, and I flunked it because I didn't finish my novel. So I set a really good example for my children, as always.
And that's when the dog stepped in.
Yeah, the dog was like, "Come on." No, and then what happened was I didn't know anyone, so they had an in-person course. You could go 1 night a week for 3 months and meet fellow writers. And I thought, oh, good, I'll go meet my people, the sad, depressed writers. Oh my God, it was perfect. The only problem with me is like they went, "Oh, you're an American." I know, that's like one, yeah. And Trump had just, Trump was in office. So anyway, I took that class, and I didn't it's not like I didn't get anything out of it. It was more like in those classes, they're not designed really to teach you to write. They're designed to take yourself seriously as a writer. And anyway, the great thing about that class was that I met my agent. And I didn't have to query.
Explain briefly what that is, to query, maybe, for some people who don't know.
Querying is probably the worst thing you'll ever do in your entire life. It's worse than being burned at the stake. Would you? It's a hopeless and sad situation. No, seriously, I wrote a different novel and I sent out 98 queries, I got 98 rejections. You have to be really tough in this business, but so you send an agent, you pick out an agent and you say, oh, hi, I've written this novel, it's blah, 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 and I think you'll like it because you are blah, 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 blah. And so you have to do all this research on every single person, and then you get a little rejection notice and email saying, not for us. And then that keeps happening. So anyway, we're all in the same boat, all 15 of us. And so we were bracing ourselves for querying. And then at the very end of this class, they have a little cocktail party. And my agent is Felicity Blunt. You will know that name because her sister is Emily Blunt, and she's married to Stanley Tucci. But there are some things I don't research, and one of the things are the background of famous people. So I meet Felicity Blunt. She says to me, oh, I really like your novel. And I thought she meant someone else because she represents a lot of thrillers, and I thought, oh. And I was waiting for her to say, I really like the part where they murder all those people. But she finally, after like 10 minutes, she mentioned Elizabeth Zott. And I said, oh my God, you mean me? And she goes, yeah. Anyway, so we had a nice conversation, and at the end of it, she said something about, oh, I can see this on the screen. My husband's an actor. And I said, oh, really? Would he have been in anything I would have seen? So she's really impressed with me. And she goes, maybe. Anyway, and she never told me who it was, by the way. I had a friend there, and she's like, you're such an idiot. Anyway, so that's how I met Felicity. So so Felicity said, when are you going to be done with your novel? And I made it up. I just said, it was February. I said, I'll be done in June. And she kind of frowned. And then, because I only had like 3 chapters to go. But I was working full time. Right. So I said June. And so in April, she called me and she said, are you done yet? And I said June. And then I went in, she said, come in and have a talk with me. And so I went, and then she said, I'm just going to sign you on those 10,000 words.
Wow.
Yeah, and I went, oh, really? So I was so excited that on the way back from her office, I was fiddling with the phone. I guess I was fiddling. And I didn't know this, but anyway, the phone started ringing, and I answer it. It just says, London Emergency Services. And I said, hello? And they said, you've been calling us. No, is there an emergency? We need to know right away. And I said, oh, I got an agent. That's nice, ma'am, but that's not an emergency.
If there's a movie of this, that has to be the same guy who comes over twice when you... And then you guys fall in love,
You know what he brought the second time? The fireman? He brought me a fire extinguisher.
Well, you're American,
Yeah.
So. So at this point, you're bicultural. I mean, you've been there a few years. How long have you been in London?
6 years.
How would you describe the difference between the American and British sense of humor?
They think they're funnier than us. They really do. And I just think you've got to be kidding me. I mean, really? But they do. They're just convinced. Actually, though, it's going to sound like I'm dropping names, and I apologize for this. I was talking with Stanley Tucci, and he goes, I know. They think they're so fucking funny.
And then you said, I was talking to these 2 sheiks in Dubai. I'm just fixated on that.
Yeah.
So, as some people probably know, your book is being adapted for television.
Yay!
So after all this time of such a personal labor of love and living alone with your book for so long, and then taking it to Dubai and to Stanley Tucci and the fire department and everywhere, describe a little bit about the strangeness of letting it go in the world in this new way, too.
Well, it's surreal. I mean, first of all, it's incredible. I'm really grateful. I'm honored. We've got people in the audience tonight from Aggregate Films. They're producing it, and from Apple TV. And yeah, and I couldn't be more happy. This is a great team of people, and I'm thrilled to be part of it. I mean, actually, though, I say that, but it's their responsibility. And, you kind of have to hand over your baby, but what good people to hand it over to.
Right.
So, yeah, I feel really good about that.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I'd like to give you a big hand with everybody else here.
Thank you.
What?
I'm going to get my for the audience.
Can you tell about what happened with the 10 men?
Oh, I love this story. Absolutely.
yeah.
So those 10 men that day, they never stood up for me. And I just couldn't believe it. And by the way, I never ever worked for that team again. And they called me a couple weeks later and said, "Do you want to work on this?" And I said, "No. Guess why?" And they never spoke to me again. And then I was in Seattle giving a talk. And all of a sudden I saw this guy. I mean, I'd gone to his wedding. I saw this guy coming down, and he was carrying this enormous load of books. And it was one of my colleagues from that meeting. And he came up to me, and he bent down, and he goes, "Thanks for not using our names."
Wow.
And he said, "See these? I bought one for every single person in the meeting that day. And you can write whatever you want in each one." But, honestly, he said something that I really took to heart. He said, "I went home that night. I felt really bad because you're a friend of mine, and I let you down that day." He said, "But I let you down as a woman in the workplace, in a male-dominated workplace. I let you down. I went home, and I have 2 young daughters, and I'm reading to them. And they said to me, 'Oh, Daddy, you're my hero.' And he said, 'No, I'm a scumbag.'" And I just thought, I said, "You're telling me this now? Could you have sped it up? Are you telling me this now because now the book is out?" But anyway, no. So we're friends again. But yeah, apparently he did hand out all the books.
Wow.
Yeah. I can't really say.
To you, with the microphone. So when you have a question, raise your hand. Diane will call on you, but stand up and belt it out, and they will repeat the question. Thank you.
Yes, you with the hat on, right there.
Oh, I was separating.
What experiment were you doing in your kitchen?
What experiment were you doing in the kitchen that required the fire department?
I was separating carbon, and it turned into this black snake sort of thing. I didn't know that it would also explode, and it got out of hand pretty quickly, and our building was actually pretty empty anyway, so I thought, well, at least no one can smell this too. But the neighbor across the road saw the flames, and she was the one who called 111. So there was another experiment that I did with pistachios, and those flames were much larger, and I called 911, and I called, and anyway, my husband is really oblivious about nearly everything. I only did these experiments when he was out of town because there were often vapors and odors, and he's pretty sensitive to smell, but not really visually. So he came home from this trip, and he's standing in our kitchen, and one of the walls was black from the flame, and he's just standing in front of it, and then he turns around and he goes, "So, what happened here?" And I said, I don't know. He never asked me again.
You're dropping the wisdom, Bonnie.
Yeah.
Any question on this side? Yes.
How long did it take you to write?
How long did it take to write the book?
5 years. I was working full-time. I know it sounds like a long time story ago, but I was working full-time. But no, it took me 5 years, and the only way I got it done was to get up really early and write in the morning before work, and then whatever I had left over for work was, oh well. So yeah, that's how I had to end up doing it.
Yes.
Hi, I want to thank you first so much for writing this book, and it really resonated with me. I'm actually a PhD student in chemical biology, and I was a row. And that's actually
A rower.
the similarities that I have with the book, but the only thing that might be as much of experience is doing a PhD that's experimental. And when you were talking about this idea of writing a book being a marathon, it reminds me a lot of doing a PhD and doing research in the lab, and also Elizabeth's experiences. And I was wondering, now you're embarking on writing this other novel, and as someone who's, toward this end of this long, grueling journey in a lab, the idea of doing more research after, in some sense, is exciting to me, but it also is very daunting. And I'm wondering if you could reflect on, did the success of this book make you more confident in pursuing this other novel? Would you have done it anyway? How do you see taking on another marathon after this journey?
Well, this
Wait,
is a great
repeat
question.
the question. You get
Oh,
to
This reader is a rower and is pursuing a PhD in experimental chemical biology.
Like me.
And like me, mainly like me.
Oh, come on, Diane.
And her question is about resilience and strength, and if Bonnie, tell me if I'm misrepresenting you, but if you feel, if Bonnie feels more confidence going into a second book after this book?
I think for the answer is that the expectations should probably feel high to me, but instead I'm just sort of blocking that out, because all you can do is write what you feel passionate about. And so that's what I'm doing, and it's really important not to have anyone sitting on your shoulder going, well, you really can't think things like, what will my agent think? What will my editor think? You just cannot listen to that. The only regret I have is that Friday has passed on, and so she can't hear this next book. And she was really helpful, because I swear to you, she'd go, you need more of the dog. I mean, no, she was really, but honestly, it's another marathon, though. It is. It's another marathon.
Right. Questions? Yes.
Elizabeth places the formula on Calvin's tombstone. What is the formula?
What is the formula that Elizabeth places on Calvin's tombstone?
It's oxytocin. So women create oxytocin when they're in labor, but it's actually something. It's the thing that makes you feel happy usually, and so it represents Elizabeth's happiness was Calvin.
Oh, Bonnie.
I'm sorry. I know. Yeah.
Yes. What was the inspiration for the relationship between Elizabeth and Calvin? I feel like I should say, pass it down.
So I wanted to have these two people who were, very different, the kind of misfits. I wanted Calvin to look like the typical, privileged white male, rower, Cambridge, etc., must have had all the breaks in the world, has been nominated for a Nobel Prize, etc., etc. But the truth of his situation is completely different from that. And the same with Elizabeth. She's being judged by everyone at work because she's beautiful. And there was a recent study that still shows that beautiful women are considered less intelligent. And so I figured, make her a chemist, put her in her lab, they're going to think she's dumb. Even though they kind of know she's not, she'll be judged by her looks. And I thought about how often all of us judge each other by what we see, and we assume we know what people are like. They got everything wrong about Elizabeth and Calvin. But what I was really exploring in their relationship was Calvin is a man who is not intimidated by his partner's intelligence. he supports her and he admires her. That's why he's attracted to her. So that was not very subtle, but that was what their love affair was about.
Yes.
Were you always planning on killing off Calvin?
Todd, should I tell them? So
I'm not going to translate that one.
So the question is, was I always planning on killing off Calvin? It surprised me when I killed him off, but there was this kid at this signing, and she's like 13 years old, and she comes up with her mom, and the mom goes, "My daughter would like to ask you something." And she goes, "Why did you have to kill Calvin?" And I said, "He had to go." And Todd said, "She's scarred for life now."
Yes, in the blue shirt.
Hi, did you always know, first of all, I love the book, as I think everyone here did, but did you always know that you were going to make that transition from being a chemist to a chef and using the same kind of principle? How did you do that? What was your inspiration?
Well, I knew I wanted her to be,
repeat it.
so why did I know Elizabeth was going to be on TV, make the transition from chemist to cook? I wanted her to be a very reluctant TV star. Because she wants to be taken seriously. Women on TV were not taken seriously. So I wanted her to be taken seriously. I made her a cook because chemistry actually is cooking. It's unfortunate because that meant I had to learn chemistry. I kept thinking, could I have made her a biologist or I don't know, anything else? But I knew a woman of that era would be on television if she was doing something related to the home. And so I wanted her on television. I had to make her attractive because they weren't going to put someone like anyone on television with no experience. So why not put a beautiful woman on television who says she knows chemistry? Yeah, that makes sense. And so that was my goal. The problem is not just with the chemistry. I actually hate to cook. So I had to research cooking, and I kept thinking, this is good for me because I'm gonna probably get into cooking now.
Probably.
Yeah, probably soon.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for your book. And second is your book faces and deals with really heavy themes, abuse, injustice, and I'm sure any of the women here might experience something like that. Why did you choose color to address that?
Should I repeat it?
Yeah.
The book deals with a lot of dark, heavy subjects like abuse and other types of experiences and things that many women recognize, and talk about why you chose comedy as one of the ways you approach the subject.
Well, I've written a lot of speeches, and the one thing about a speech is that you're really telling a story, but a lot of speeches are really boring, and some of them are really, really depressing, and you cannot preach to people and make them listen. No one wants to be preached to. And so I thought the best way to deal with hard topics was to lighten them up as much as possible, because that's how we have to survive these turbulent times. These are tough times for a lot of people. And I just thought over and over, I always think of the same, when I picture a reader, I always picture the same thing. Someone coming home from their job and they've had a really rough day and they just don't want to read something super dark. So mine's only partly dark.
Yes.
What do you think readers misunderstand about the book?
What do you think readers misunderstand about the book?
I'll tell you, I think this is the greatest thing ever. So I've talked to groups all over the world. I've been on calls with Korea and Brazil, and all over the world. And I was on this call with Korea, this huge group, in India, these huge groups. And these Koreans said to me, are all the characters Korean? And I said, oh, well I said, sure. I I mean,
Bonnie, you did not say that.
Well, no, I said, well, they can be anyone. Because originally, I didn't write any description of any person, and my editors asked me to put in a description, and I said, well, I was trying to create universality.
Right.
And so if you start giving physical descriptions, then they can't picture the person in their head. So it's really interesting, because then I started talking to these people in India, and they said the same thing. They're Indian, aren't they? Then these Turkish women said, they're Turkish. And it was really interesting to hear this, and then, but the burqa'd women didn't say they're Saudi Arabian. They said nothing.
But it's a testament to your writing that they all identified it so closely.
What I think that was the thing that I did not understand, how all over the world we all feel the same exact way. I mean, we're all talking about the same things.
Yeah. It's powerful. Yes.
Two things. First of all, I love the book. I think I read it in one day. I kept saying, just one more chapter. And as I finished one more chapter, I go, one more chapter. And I'll live it up. Two things. I love that you gave Harriet a new life and that she became a person that she wanted to be because her husband was so horrible to her. And I really like that about that. But also at the end, when the mother of Calvin came and they did this whole thing, and that was the first time Elizabeth ever showed emotion and went hysterical crying. And I cried with her. But you made her a more human being in that regard. Was that something that just came to you, or that was always going to happen to her?
I'm going to repeat this.
Oh, yeah, you better. Okay.
Wish me luck. Harriet Sloane, this reader really loved the way Harriet was given a new life after the difficulty of her marriage, etc., and she found that really moving, and then brought up Elizabeth meeting Avery Parker, Calvin's mother, and how that's the first time Elizabeth showed a lot of intense emotion, and was just asking Bonnie to talk about that choice.
Yeah, so, you know, Elizabeth, some people have asked me this question, I get this almost in every audience, is Elizabeth Zott neurodiverse? Because she doesn't show emotion. The truth is, Elizabeth Zott is based on the fundamentals of Stoicism as written by Marcus Aurelius, which are self-responsibility and courage and logic and bravery, and that is her. And she is afraid a lot to show emotion. She's come from a terrible background. She's self-educated. You know, I think most people would struggle with that, but she just keeps going, because when I was writing her, I thought, you know, I think for a lot of people, you don't really know who you're going to be when you grow up. Sometimes you're already at 50 and you still don't know. Elizabeth Zott knew who she was. It was really fun to write a character who knew who she was, but she felt like she couldn't express emotion because, you know, she kept losing everything that she loved, and she was just afraid. And then at the end, when you have women whose choices were made for them by other people, the mother wasn't able to keep her baby, it was taken from her. Elizabeth was forced to have her baby. These choices that women should be making on their own were decided by society. And then, you know, someone said it's a really happy ending. I said, really? Matt still doesn't have a father. I mean, you know, it's really interesting that a lot of people talk about that ending, and I say, do you notice, though, these are all choices that were taken from women. They didn't have control on their lives. But yeah, that when I was writing the ending, I thought, well, if I cry, because I never cry, I'm a little bit like Elizabeth. I don't cry very easily. My husband cries all the time. I'm like, are you all right? Is that allergies? He goes, but I thought, okay, if I can make myself cry, then it'll work for me. And it did make me cry. But really, the part that makes me cry is when 6:30 recognizes the mother.
Yes.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Me either. But I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about your work as a copywriter and all of the ways that you were a writer in your life and how that informed this.
The question is to talk a little bit about your journey as a writer and now at your advanced age, Bonnie. I'm teasing you. To just talk about your journey as a writer before you forget.
Well, now that
I'm right there with you.
oh my God, you kill me. Okay, so I did a couple of different writing jobs because I knew I wanted to be a writer. I wrote my first novel when I was 5. It's never been published. It's still available. And Todd doesn't even have any interest in reading it. It starts out, it just says, once upon a time. Then there's an unforgivable sentence in the middle, and then it says the end. And I think it's really good, and Todd, it's of appropriate length. So, no, I've been writing a long time, but anyway, I had one job as a tech writer, and I was really bad at it. And I sort of got, I won't say fired, well, let go, I guess that's sort of the same. Encouraged to find employment elsewhere. Because I was writing these manuals and I was so bored that I started saying, like, if you get this message, it means the world's about to end. I think that you should probably seek shelter, or, and anyway, they didn't think it was funny. And as I said, they encouraged me to find employment elsewhere. And so I became a copywriter because I really liked working with really creative people, and the people I worked with were fantastic. I worked with a lot of directors and producers on commercials and things, and we did a lot of campaigns, big campaigns. I also worked independently for a lot of, people writing their speeches and things for them. And sort of the whole gamut. I had my own business, and I didn't want to work for one ad agency because then you just get whatever they assign you. So I always worked on the outside. And I had this cadre of colleagues all over the place, from coast to coast. And we were always so joyous, like, oh, I'm on that too. And then we'd spend half our time just doing a parody of whatever we were doing, and then we'd settle down and do the real work. It was fun sometimes.
Were you writing fiction then in your free time?
Not until my advanced age.
Yes.
Waited. Yeah. No, I wrote half a novel, and I didn't go any further. That was the one with Madeline Zott as the protagonist. And then I wrote another novel, and it was only 700 pages long, and no one wanted to read it because it was 700 pages long. And that is a hot tip. If you're writing a novel and you're a debut author, do not write anything like a 700-page novel. So an agent sees 700 pages. They look at the word count and they go, no. And I ran this by Felicity. I said, would you like to look at my 700-page novel? And she goes, no. And that's because there's an economy to publishing. It's really expensive to print a book that big. And if you're an unknown author, it's just taboo, and in German, it takes on 25% in weight. And in Saudi Arabia, too.
Yes. That's what the sheiks told me.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Oh. Who's playing Elizabeth Zott? Brie Larson, Academy Award winner Brie Larson. And we're going to take a look at her right now. Do I do that?
Brian, thank you.
If you're
Okay.
asking me, we're in big trouble.
Boom, bam, I can sing.
May I join you?
I can jam. Wham,
You're one of the smartest people in this lab.
boom, bam, I'm a killer.
You hungry, little fella?
Yes, I am. If I can do it, you can too.
Welcome, viewers. My name is Elizabeth Zott, and this is Supper at 6.
Okay, Apple people, we can't wait till fall, so hurry up. We're all subscribers. Thank you so much. Bonnie will sign in the lobby. It was so fun. Thank you.